The moment Solène walked into the Monday morning all-staff meeting and saw him standing at the front of the room, her stomach dropped straight through the floor. It was him, the same man she had grabbed by the collar at the Rooftop 44 charity gala on Saturday night, the same man whose glass of Cabernet she had knocked out of his hand when she stepped between him and her best friend Camille. Except Camille was on the banned list, and she wasn't going to think about that right now. The same man who had looked down at her with those dark, unreadable eyes and said, very quietly, "You have no idea who I am." She hadn't cared then. She cared now. "Good morning, everyone." His voice filled the conference room the same way it had filled the rooftop, effortlessly, like he didn't need to try. "My name is Ethan Cross. As of today, I'm your new CEO." Solène sat very still and stared at the table in front of her. She needed to back up, because none of this made any sense without knowing how it started. And it started the way most disasters in Solène's life started, with her doing the right thing at exactly the wrong time. Solène Voss was 31 years old, a senior marketing strategist at Meridian Group, a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Chicago that handled brand development for corporate clients. She had worked there for 6 years. She had built 2 of their largest client portfolios from scratch. She kept her desk clean, arrived 15 minutes early, and had in 6 years never once caused a scene at a company event. That record ended Saturday. The Meridian annual charity gala was held at Rooftop 44, a venue on the 40th floor of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. The company rented it every year for the client mixer, which was technically a fundraiser for a children's literacy nonprofit, but was functionally an excuse for the senior partners to drink good wine and impress people. Solène went because attendance was expected. She wore a navy wrap dress, brought her colleague Faye as her +1, and planned to stay exactly 2 hours. She almost made it. She was 40 minutes from leaving when she spotted Bette across the room. Bette Okafor had been Solène's best friend since college. They had shared a dorm room freshman year, survived 3 apartments together in their 20s, and celebrated every raise, promotion, and bad breakup side by side. 2 years ago, Bette had started dating a man named Curtis. 6 months ago, Curtis had proposed. 4 months ago, Solène had stood in Bette's kitchen at midnight, while Bette cried and admitted that Curtis had not been kind to her for a long time, that she was afraid of what he would do when she ended it. Bette left Curtis 3 months ago. It had not been quiet. So when Solène saw Bette standing near the bar at a company gala, a gala Bette had no business being at, Bette worked in healthcare administration, she knew nobody here, and saw the man beside her gripping her elbow in a way that was not friendly, something cold settled over Solène's entire body. She moved across the room without deciding to move. She didn't know who the man was. Dark suit, broad shoulders, the kind of that made people step back slightly. Not Curtis. She would have recognized Curtis. This was someone else. Someone who had Bette's arm and was speaking to her in a low, urgent voice while Bette's eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Solène walked up and put herself between them. "Hey," she said to Bette. "There you are. I've been looking all over for you." Bette looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Solène, who are you?" The man looked at Solène the way people look at things that have wandered into the wrong lane. "I'm her friend," Solène said. "And she's coming with me. We're in the middle of a conversation." "Actually," Solène said, "she's done with the conversation. You can see that. She's done." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice so calm it was almost worse than anger, "I suggest you walk away." Solène did not walk away. "I suggest," she said, keeping her voice equally calm, "that you let go of her arm." He didn't. And that was when Solène's hand moved. Not a full slap, not the kind that snaps a head sideways. A single, sharp open palm strike against his forearm, breaking his grip on Bette. Practical, not dramatic. Bette stumbled back. Solène took her by the wrist. "We're leaving," Solène said, and walked her best friend toward the elevator before anyone could form words. She didn't look back. She should have looked back. Sunday passed the way Sundays do after a crisis, slow and quiet and too full of quiet. Bette told her over the phone that the man was someone Curtis had sent, a business associate, someone trying to get information about the divorce proceedings. She said she was fine. She said thank you. She said to stop apologizing. Solène spent the rest of Sunday cleaning her apartment and trying not to replay it. On Monday morning, she walked into the Meridian all-staff meeting 7 minutes early, poured herself coffee, and picked a seat 2 rows from the front. And there he was. Ethan Cross. New CEO, the man whose arm she had slapped at a company gala 48 hours ago. He was looking directly at her. She picked up her coffee cup and put it down again without drinking. "Meridian has been moving through a transition period," Ethan said, addressing the full room. "You're aware of the changes in leadership over the last quarter. My goal for the first 30 days is simple. I'm here to listen. I want to meet with every team lead individually. I want to understand what's working and what isn't. He paused. I don't believe in walking into a company and assuming I already know the answers. People around Solène were nodding. Faye, sitting 2 seats down, leaned close and whispered, "He is extremely attractive. He's fine." Solène whispered back, "You've gone completely white." "I'm fine." She was not fine. After the meeting ended, Solène moved toward the door with everyone else, keeping her head down, counting on the crowd. She almost made it. She was 3 feet from the hallway when she heard her name. "Ms. Voss." She stopped, turned. Ethan Cross was looking at her across the emptying room. His expression was unreadable. He waited until the last few people had filtered out, and then he crossed toward her with the unhurried pace of a man who was used to other people waiting. "Saturday night," he said. Solène straightened. "Mr. Cross, I'm not here to make it an issue," he said. She blinked. "I want to be clear about that," he continued. "What happened at the gala? I understand why you did what you did. You didn't know who I was. You saw someone you cared about in a situation that looked wrong, and you acted." He looked at her steadily. "That's not something I hold against someone." Solène waited for the but. There was always a but. "That said," he added, "I do want to understand what you saw that made you intervene. Because from where I was standing, I was having a difficult conversation with someone connected to a personal matter. And from where you were standing, it clearly looked like something else." "Her arm," Solène said. "You were holding her arm." "I was," he said. "She was about to leave without telling me something I needed to know. Something that had nothing to do with anything that would have hurt her." He paused. "I knew Curtis Aldridge in college. He and I had mutual business connections. When I found out what he'd been doing, I cut contact. What I was trying to find out Saturday night, from her, was whether she was safe. Whether there was anything she needed." Solène stared at him. "I'm not asking you to believe that immediately," Ethan said. "I'm just telling you what was actually happening." "Why are you telling me at all?" she asked. He almost smiled. It wasn't quite a smile, more like the beginning of one that he'd decided to put away. "Because you work here, and I'd rather we understand each other than spend the next year being professionally awkward." Solène thought about that for a moment. "That seems reasonable," she said. "Good." He turned to go, then stopped. "Your work on the Callaway Hotel's rebranding. I read the file on Saturday before the gala. That campaign was yours?" She nodded. "It was very good," he said, and then he left. Solène stood in the empty conference room for a moment longer than she needed to. The next 3 weeks were professional. Entire Ethan Cross was, it turned out, exactly as competent as he was unsettling. He moved through the company with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before, walked into organizations mid-crisis, and figured out what needed to be fixed. He sat in on pitches without saying a word, asked single-pointed questions that somehow identified the exact weakness in a plan, and never wasted anyone's time. He met with Solène 3 times in those 3 weeks. Once formally, as part of his team lead rotation, when he asked about the marketing department's pipeline and client retention strategy. Once informally, in the kitchen, when they both arrived at 7:45 a.m., and the coffee was still brewing, and they stood on opposite sides of the counter in silence for almost 2 full minutes before he asked her what she was working on. And she told him about the Hartwell Logistics account, and they ended up talking for 40 minutes until Faye walked in and looked between them with an expression Solène chose not to acknowledge. The third times was not planned. It was a Wednesday evening. Solène was still at her desk at 8 o'clock, finishing the final deck for a Thursday morning pitch, when the lights on the floor went to half power. The automatic energy save that kicked in after business hours. She was so deep in the presentation that she didn't hear anyone approach until a cup of coffee appeared beside her keyboard. She startled, looked up. Ethan was standing there in his shirt sleeves, jacket somewhere else, tie loosened. He looked like a person suddenly, rather than a CEO. It was disorienting. "You're still here," he said. "So are you," she pointed out. He sat down in the chair across from her desk, not asking, not formally, just sat, like it was natural. "What's the pitch?" she told him. She showed him 2 of the slides. He asked 2 questions. She answered them. He suggested a different way to frame the 3rd section that was, genuinely, much better than what she'd had, and she changed it before she could stop herself. "Thank you," she said. "You were almost there. I just moved 1 corner." She looked at him across the desk. The half-lit office was quiet. Outside the windows, the city was doing what the city always did. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "The night of the gala. After I walked away with Bette. What did you do?" He was quiet for a moment. "I went and found the event coordinator and told her there might be someone on the guest list who shouldn't have been. I had them check the stairwells." He looked at her. I wanted to make sure no one was following you out. Solène said nothing. She got home safe, he asked. She did. Good, he said. He stood, retrieved his jacket from somewhere she hadn't noticed he'd put it, and stopped at the edge of her desk. Get some sleep after the pitch tomorrow. I will. He left. She stared at her screen for a while without seeing it. This was a problem. She told Faye about it the next morning before the pitch. They were in the bathroom and Faye was touching up her eyeliner and Solène was talking to Faye's reflection. He stayed late to make sure we got home safe, Solène said. From the event that I didn't even realize he'd attended in an official capacity. Said Faye. He's my CEO. I know, this cannot be a thing, Solène. Faye put the eyeliner down and looked at her directly. It is already a thing. The question is what kind of thing? It's a professional complication. That's one way to describe a man who brings you coffee at 8 o'clock at night and looks at you like you're a problem he wants to solve. He doesn't look at me like that. Faye picked up her eyeliner again. Okay. The pitch went well. Very well. The Hartwell team came in skeptical and left with a signed letter of intent, which was not something Solène had expected to happen in the first meeting. Ethan happened to be in the reception area when the Hartwell group was leaving, and he shook hands with their director and said a few words she couldn't hear from across the room. And whatever he said made the director laugh. He was good at this. It was a specific and slightly irritating kind of good. Afterward, back in her office, she found a sticky note on her keyboard that said, "Well done." No signature. She pulled it off and put it in her desk drawer and told herself that was a completely normal thing to do. Then everything went sideways. She found out about Petra on a Thursday. Petra Aldridge was Curtis's sister. Solène learned this from Bette, who called her during lunch and explained it in a voice that had gone very flat and controlled, the way Bette's voice got when she was trying to stay calm. Petra Aldridge had been, for the past month, making calls. To Bette's workplace, to Bette's landlord, to at least two of Bette's mutual friends, people who knew both of them, people who had slowly, quietly been pulling back in the past few weeks without fully explaining why. What Petra was telling people, that Bette had stolen from Curtis, that the divorce had been Bette's idea because she'd been hiding money, that Bette was unstable, vindictive, not to be trusted. None of it was true. All of it was designed to isolate Bette before the divorce was finalized. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Solène asked. Because I thought it would stop, Bette said. Because I kept thinking this can't keep going, she'll get tired of it. A pause. She didn't get tired of it. Okay, Solène said. Okay. We need a lawyer. I have a lawyer. We need a better lawyer. And I need you to send me everything. Every call log you have. Every message. Everything. She spent her lunch break on the phone. She spent her afternoon half in meetings and half composing a very careful email to Bette's attorney. She was distracted and she knew she was distracted, and she was trying to push through it. What she didn't expect was for Ethan to notice. He caught her after a 4 o'clock briefing, in the hallway outside the conference room. Something happened, he said. It wasn't a question. Solène looked at him. She thought about saying I'm fine. She had said I'm fine so many times in the last 6 years that it had stopped meaning anything. It's about Bette, she said, and Curtis, and his sister. Ethan went very still, she told him. Not everything, enough. Enough for him to understand what was happening and why it mattered. When she finished, he said, Petra Aldridge has done this before. To someone else. 3 years ago. There's a pattern. He said it with the particular precision of someone who had already thought about this. I can put you in contact with an attorney who knows this family. She handled the last case. She'll understand the context. You know about the last case? Solène asked. I know the person it happened to, he said. She's a friend. She looked at him. Ethan. It was the first time she'd used his name without a title. He looked back at her. I'll text you the attorney's contact tonight. He did. Bette called the attorney the next morning. Things began slowly to move in a different direction. The problem with doing something kind for someone, something real, not performative, is that it changes the way they see you. Solène knew this. She had built entire marketing campaigns on the principle that authentic action redefines a brand's identity. She understood the mechanism perfectly well. That didn't make it any easier to apply the principle to herself. She started noticing things she hadn't let herself notice before. The way Ethan listened in meetings, not waiting to speak, actually listening. The way he never took credit in rooms where it would have been easy to. The way he remembered details. She mentioned once, in passing, that she didn't drink coffee after noon, and every subsequent late meeting, there was green tea beside her seat. Not announced, just there. Faye noticed the green tea. She said nothing. She didn't have to. What Solène kept coming back to was not the big things. It wasn't the attorney contact or the gala, or the fact that he had read her file before they met. It was the small things. It was the way he had sat across from her desk at 8 o'clock at night, not performing concern, just present. The way he'd said you were almost there. The way he looked at her sometimes, not the CEO looking at a report look, not the professional assessment look, the other look, the one that Solène had a name for but was not going to say out loud. She told herself it was too complicated. She told herself he was her boss. She told herself she was an adult who could manage her own feelings. All of this was true. None of it was making things less complicated. It came to a head on a Friday evening in the parking garage, which was not the setting Solène would have chosen, but you don't get to choose. She was walking to her car after another late night. She heard footsteps behind her and turned, because she always turned. 6 years of walking to parking garages alone had made that reflexive, and it was Ethan. "I'm not following you," he said immediately. "My car's on this level." "I know," she said. She kept walking. He fell into step beside her. For a moment they just walked. "I want to say something," he said, "and I want to say it outside the office so that it's completely clear that I'm saying it as a person, not as your employer." Solène stopped walking. "I'm aware of what this looks like," Ethan said. "I'm aware that the situation is complicated by the professional context. I'm not asking you to do anything about it. I'm not. This isn't a move, Solène. I just need to say it because I'm running out of ways to be in the same room as you without saying it." She looked at him in the low light of the parking garage. He looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like he wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen next. "Say it," she said. "I think about you," he said, "constantly, in ways that have nothing to do with marketing strategy or client retention." He stopped. "That's it. That's the whole thing." Solène was quiet for a moment. "You brought me green tea," she said. He frowned slightly. "What?" "Every meeting afternoon. Green tea. Because I mentioned once that I don't drink coffee afternoon. You said that in a conversation 3 weeks ago." "I know," she said. "That's my point." He looked at her steadily. "I think about you too," she said, "in ways that also have nothing to do with marketing strategy." She held his gaze. "But we have to do this right. Whatever this is, we have to be adults about it." "I've never been anything other than an adult about it," he said. "Good," she said. "Then we start there." He almost smiled again. This time it made it all the way. They were careful. Not secretive. Careful, there's a difference, they told HR. They had the conversation with the appropriate parties and put the appropriate agreements in place. And Solène's reporting chain was adjusted so that her direct manager was the COO and not Ethan. It was handled the way adults handle things that matter to them. Bette's case settled 4 months later. Petra's campaign of harassment was documented and presented, and Curtis's legal team, faced with evidence of coordinated defamation, advised their client to agree to the original settlement terms. Bette got the apartment. She got the accounts. She got her life back. She called Solène when it was final and didn't say anything for a long moment. And neither did Solène, because sometimes things don't need words. They had been friends for 12 years. 12 years was enough to know when silence was okay. The thing that surprised Solène was how much of herself she had been holding back without realizing it. She had spent years being good at her work and careful in her life, and making herself small in all the places where smallness felt like safety. She had watched Bette go through something that terrified her and decided, somewhere in the process, that the solution was to need less, want less, risk less. She was good at her job. She had friends she loved. That was enough. That was the deal she'd made with herself. She hadn't told anyone about the deal. She hadn't even fully said it to herself. Ethan had a way of making her say things she hadn't planned to say. Not by pushing, by listening. Really listening. The way he listened in meetings, which was something she'd noticed before she'd known why she was noticing it. He listened like what you said mattered, and somewhere in that, she'd started letting herself mean the things she said again. It was not a dramatic revelation. It didn't happen in one moment. It happened the way most real things happen, slowly, then all at once. On a Sunday morning in late November, Solène was standing in Ethan's kitchen making eggs while he read something on his phone, and she was telling him about a conversation she'd had with her mom about the holidays, and she realized in the middle of the sentence that this was just her life now. This ordinary, unguarded, unremarkable Sunday morning was just a part of her life. She had not protected herself out of it. She had not made herself too small for it to find. She finished the sentence. He looked up from his phone. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "I'm good." She meant it. Bette came over for dinner 2 weeks before Christmas. She met Ethan for the first time since the gala, properly this time, introduced in a living room with wine and food, rather than a rooftop with bruised arms and running mascara. She shook his hand and looked at him for a long moment with the evaluating look that Bette had always had, the one that had never once been wrong about a person. Okay, Bette said eventually. Okay? Ethan asked. You pass, she said, and went to help Solène in the kitchen. Ethan looked at Solène through the open doorway, with an expression she was starting to know the way you know a song you've heard so many times it's just part of you. She laughed. She turned back to the stove. Outside, November was doing what November does in Chicago. Gray and cold and completely indifferent. Inside, the kitchen was warm, and the food was almost ready. And Bette was talking too fast about something that had happened at work, and Solène stood at the stove and listened, and felt, without drama or announcement or fanfare, like herself. Completely, unguardedly, finally herself.